In this video, we are going to learn loops. A loop is a powerful programming tool that enables you to execute a set of commands repeatedly. We can automate specific tasks, but what if that task itself repetitive? Yes, for example, changing permissions on hundreds of files. We have written Ansible playbook where we have changed permission of one file on many different servers, right? But what if you have to change permission on many different files and many different systems? Then you have to use loops in your playbook. Another example I could give you is when you need to create multiple users on different servers. Then those users, you could list them in your Ansible playbook one by one, or you could write loops for it. Another example I could give you is when you need to install multiple packages on one single Ansible playbook. These are the few examples of loop. Now, loops can work hand in hand with conditions as we loop certain tasks until that condition is met. For example, if you have to create 10 users from user 1 through user 10, then you could use the condition where you specify equal 10, or when users equal 10, then it goes to the loop until that condition met. When creating loops, Ansible provides these two directives: loop and with underscore asterisk, which we'll cover in a little bit. These are the two keywords that are used to call back in the variables of the loop. All right, let's take a look at a few examples so this way you have a better understanding of how loops work. I'm going to start off with using users example. So to create multiple users in Linux command line, we use for loop. And for those users who actually have dealt or work with the Linux environment and command line every day, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. For loop is the command line in which you write for loop to create or run them multiple times. Now let's take a look at example. If you need to create multiple users, you use a for loop. And in this example, you say for u is defined as a variable in, and we want to create three users. The users are Jerry, Kramer, and Elaine. We are putting all these three users into a container called u. Then after semicolon, we put it in do user add and $u. So meaning do is create or run the command user add with the variable defined as in u, and those variables are Jerry, Kramer, and Elaine, and then be done. That's how you write a for loop in a command line. Now, what if you had to do the same thing in Ansible playbook? All right, in the regular world, let's say if you are not using loops, then what you do, you create the YAML file, define the name of the YAML file, the playbook, and then you run these three tasks. Task one is create Jerry, define the module user, and you put the name Jerry. Second task, same thing for Kramer, and third task, same thing for Elaine. But what if you have 20 different users? Are you going to write all of them one by one in that playbook? That playbook is not going to be very well organized, right? So then we use loops. All right, one of the way we could use loops is adding loop parameter. Check it out. So we actually create the YAML file and we call it user by loop one.yaml. Then we define the name of the playbook, the host where it's going to run on, and the task. Create user. The user itself is the module, and the name, which name do you want to create, meaning which user you want to create, and you are defining here is the item. What is that item? Item comes down to the loop, and a loop is that's the parameters where it's defining the list of users. Now once that is defined here, the list of all the loops go back into that item variable that is in front of name. All right, that's one way of creating loop. The second way of creating loop is through variable by declaring the variable right in the beginning. All right, so here is the second example. We'll name a user by loop to the YAML file. We'll define the name, create user through loop, the host, local host, the variables right here. We define users. This is just the name that I picked. You could pick anything. And I put in within the brackets the name of the users I want to be created. Jerry, Kramer, and Elaine. Then comes in the task. See how our task is so shortened now? Name, create users, the user module, the name, the item. Now, one thing you probably notice, hey Imran, how come you don't have double quotes here? You have single quote and you don't have space here. Let me tell you this in a very simple way. This or that, either would work. So single quote, double quote, having space, no space, any of them would work. All right. Then coming down, see with underscore items, that's the user it's calling. So the first thing is right here when I'm defining the name is the item. And what is the item? Right here it goes down here. It says with items user. Okay, this is the user. And where is this user variable? The user variable goes back to this variable, and these are the users. So these are the two Ansible playbooks that we will use. So I'm gonna go into my Linux machine, and right here I could go through either command line console, or I have logged in through PuTTY. This time I'm just gonna go through PuTTY. Here is my PuTTY session. All right, let's move down this way, and I'm logged in as root, and I am in /etc Ansible playbooks directory. All right, I have already created the user by loop one.yaml file to save some time. Hit enter, and this is exactly what I have listed right here. So let me move this to the left a little. Exactly what I said is going to create a user with module and the name define items, and the items is going to indicate what we have listed inside the loop. All right, let's save it and let's run it. So Ansible dash playbook and user by loop one. All right, create users through loop, gathering facts. This is where it's going to run on localhost. Change one, meaning created all of these users, one, two, three, and it's done. All right, how do we verify? Do cat and etc password and see if you have if they created the user in that file. Okay, so right here are the users that I just created using this playbook. Excellent. All right, so let's clear the screen. Now let's do it with the other method, which is through adding variable. But of course, before I do that, let me remove the users. So I'll use user, delete, and I'll just say simply Jerry and Kramer and Elaine. So these users are gone. Let's verify it. Etc password. Yes, they are gone. See, nothing is in there. Clear the screen. When you created these users, it also created the home directory. So home directory are in slash home, and you see these directories are there. So let's go ahead and remove these directories as well. Elaine, sorry, let's define the absolute pi. Okay, that's gone. Let's hit up arrow key, remove Jerry, hit up arrow key, and remove Kramer. All right, so everything is gone from this home directory. All right, very good. Now let's run the second playbook. I am in etc Ansible playbooks directory, and let's do cat on playbook by, sorry, not playbook, user by loop 2, and that's a YAML file I ran. And I said this is the second method of calling variable through with items directives. So right here it defines, hey, right now, the item is defined for the name, and where should I go for item? Go to with items. Right here, user. Okay, I see a variable there. Okay, where should I go for this variable? Go to right here under the variables. All right, the same way I have put it in everything as is. Now let's go ahead and run it Ansible playbook and user by loop 2. Hit enter. It will run the same exact way. It will create all three users, 1 Jerry, 2 Kramer, and 3 Elaine. Let's verify again by running the etc password. And by the way, this time we'll just grep for Jerry. It's there. We'll grep for Kramer, and it's there. And then we'll grep for Elaine, and she is there. These all three funny characters are my favorite characters of a very funny show, Seinfeld. All right. Anyway, so creating multiple users through loop is something that we just learned. Now let's take another example so we have a great understanding of how loop works. Moving on, installing package example. So to install multiple package in Linux command line, we use for loop. Again, for that, we'll use for P is just a container in FTP telnet htop. These are the three packages I'm installing. I'm putting these three packages in the P container. Then I'm going to do yum install and $P, which is the container name, and whatever inside of this container will be these three packages. And minus I with option whenever it prompts for to confirm that's Y, then done. So similarly, we wanted to do the similar functionality through Ansible Playbook, adding variable and calling variables through item parameters. That's the first example. So in this example, we're picking install by loop 1, and in this one we're doing install packages through loop, the host, the variables, defining variables, and these are the three packages we want to install in our local host. All right, what are the tasks? The very first task is to install package. That's just the name. The module that we are using to do that installation is yum. Then the name. Define the name, and that is items. That's the variable, and that items will be calling with items. Before it calls, what do we want to do with this package? State, we want it to be present, which means install it. All right, then comes down with underscore items, and right here, this is going to call this, and it's telling it you need to go to packages variable to get all your list, and it'll go through the installation. Now, another way to do the installation is through adding variable and calling variable directly. Meaning right now, if you notice, I'm going to name and then defining items, and I'm going to with items. From here with items, I'm going to packages. So a couple of hops. The second way is doing adding variable and calling variables directly. And by the way, that is only applicable within Yum because Yum has the loop functionality built in. So if you're using just Yum module, then you do not need to define with underscore items and these packages. You could just put this packages variable right here where the item is. So let's look at our playbook. Everything is the same up to here, and where it says name, instead of items, we are just directly putting in packages, the name of the variable, what we have defined, and the state. We do not need to put in with underscore items. It's just that simple. And as you see, this will call directly to the list of packages. All right, so let's go to our PuTTY terminal. Let's clear the screen. And I have already written, let me close, make this smaller right here. I have already written the install by loop 2 playbook. And this is what it looks like. Exactly the same what we have here. Let's save it. And before I run it, I wanted to make sure I do not have FTP, Telnet, or HTOP packages. By the way, these are very small, tiny packages that I am installing just for testing purposes to show you how we could install them using the loop. So before we run our Ansible playbook, let's make sure we do not have these packages installed. We only have Python request FTP, which is not the actual FTP package. That's fine. Next one is Telnet. Nope. The next one is HTOP. Nope, none of them are there. Now let's go ahead and run Ansible playbook and install by loop 2 and hit enter. All right, install packages through loop, task facts gathering, install packages, and it will go through packages installation right now. Now, make sure when you are using Yum, oftentimes the developers or people who write the playbooks would go straight to the variables, not going through with underscore items. But for anything else other than Yum, you would have to go with underscore items. All right, so it says changed, okay, done because it is one task for it. Even though these are installing three packages, but they are under one task. That's why the change came back as one. So let's do rpm-qa here, and let's see if it installed FTP. It has. Right here is the package. Good. Let's do telnet. Telnet is there. Very good. And let's do htop. And htop is there. Excellent. So we got all of three packages installed using our loop. So that's how you use loop within your Ansible playbooks.